Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly. It's Thursday, it's the 25th of September 2025. I'm your host, Chris Gallagher, and we're going to talk about Celtic. We're going to talk about some news. We're going to moan, because that's what we do. And I'm delighted to say I am joined this week by the Cynic Weekly's regular host. I'm just giving him a time to, vent. It's Barry Gallagher. Hello, Barry. How are you, sir?
Very well, thanks. Delighted to be a panellist this week, and as you said, there's lots of sort of things for us to digest, as tends to be the way of Celtic right now, even more so than normal.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Great to hear from you, Barry. We also have the wonderful Scott Fleming. Hello, Scott. How are you, sir?
I'm good, I watched the game in the pub last night. I've kind of gone back and forward a lot over the last 24 hours in terms of how I feel about it, so it'll be interesting to try and make sense of that.
Yes, absolutely. We did a reaction podcast yesterday. If you're just if you're just a listener to the Cynic Weekly and you don't subscribe to any, the other stuff we do on Cynic.Co. We did a reaction yesterday where we talked through the game. That dropped very quickly after the game finished. We're doing about 30 odd podcasts a month. Plenty of stuff there that you can kind of get your teeth into if you like Celtic content. You can check us out at thecynic.co. You can also go to Patreon and search for The Cynic. Lots of options for tiers and stuff, so if you want a full boona, then go for it, but you can also kind of have different options in terms of how much you want. So check out thecynic.co and The Cynic on Patreon. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Next week, the weekly will be on Wednesday. That's just obviously due to the fact that the Europa League takes place on Thursday, which is a pain in the neck, but we'll make it work. So the Cynic Weekly will be back next week on Wednesday. Okay. Me and Barry were talking briefly before we started recording, and I want to get Barry's thoughts on it, and I want to get your thoughts on it, Scott, as well, before we get to the opening question. And it's just about watching Celtic yesterday and watching Celtic currently, whether it be the Partick Thistle game or the Hibs game coming up. It's quite hard, Barry, to divorce what's happening off the pitch with stuff going on the pitch. For me personally, I think you're very similar. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it is. I think just when you're so immersed in the club, and I know that we're all the same, but it's kind of like every waking hour you're thinking about them, and it's hard to kind of switch off and just think of purely what's happening on the pitch because of the shambles that we've been through, not just this summer, but which seems like an eternity now, certainly off the field. So when it comes to on the field things, obviously you're always looking forward to watching Celtic, but there was times last night, like Scott, I watched it in the pub as well, and there's times I kind of felt like personally I was going through the motions, but when Celtic scored, obviously you're delighted because scoring away from home in Europe, there's something really special about it, and then obviously you want us to win, but it is really hard, and I kind of wrestle with that, like how do I park all the stuff that's happening off the field to really focus on the game? And I'm guessing some people will be able to do it, and that's good, but I find it really difficult. And obviously there was some, and we'll come on to talk about it again, there was some really sort of pleasing points as well, but a lot of the things I feel on the field, there's a massive caveat of what could have been if we had done our business. All the positive things that I listened to the reaction last night, I thought it was great, but all the positive things, if they'd just been done a wee bit sooner, we might have been up and running. And how often do we see that, Gall? Like, I remember 2 years ago, I think our opening game was Feyenoord away, and we played fairly well, but it just got away from us, and we think if we'd had our new players in 6 weeks earlier, they would have been up and running by now, and I kind of feel that within the actual last night. If he'd been able to start a game of that magnitude, we might have won. So it is difficult, but I don't think there's any shame in saying that, because you care about the club so much and you just want them to be the best that they can be. And I think what's hindering us being the best they can be is all the off-field activities, or lack of activities rather, that the board are carrying out. So it's a tricky one. But yeah, I do think there was things to be positive about, but it's just sort of tinged with a wee bit of annoyance and a wee bit of regret.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well put, Barry. What about yourself, Scott? Are you finding it easy? Are you finding it difficult? What's your process?
It's obviously a wee bit different for me because I'm down here. I don't get to as many games as you guys, so I'm probably not immersed in it to the same degree. And with a game like last night, I probably did divorced it to some degree. I probably was able to just live in the moment and watch the game and sort of process it on its own terms. But it has been popping into my mind quite a lot recently. I mean, it couldn't not when you see the protests at Rugby Park and at Firhill and how much that dominated the sort of discourse around the games. And the interesting part of it for me is there's a little bit of you, like during this period where our performances are looking up a little bit. We've not been great by any means, but we are starting to play a little bit better. The new signings, Taneki and Ian Atchell in particular, are starting to have an impact. There's a party, it sounds weird, but there's a party you look at sort of chastising yourself for being happy about those things.
Yeah.
Because you almost ask yourself, well, am I being a happy clapper here? Because there will inevitably be a lot of people, whether it's fans, and we're already seeing it happening in the media, who will be desperate to just sort of slap the rest of us down and tell us, look, it's fine. You know, these two new signings are doing well. We've started well in the Europa League. We're in a really strong position in the league. We've got the League Cup final, semi-final coming up. We will be huge favourites to win. I mean, we should be beating that Rangers team. It's no great achievement. But if all of these things do fall into place for us over the next month or two, there will be a wave of this sentiment of just, look, it's fine, you're all bedwetters. And that's where you find yourself feeling weirdly conflicted about it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was thinking about, today I was kind of pondering, and I was thinking about that whenever Celtic have had the chance to really stretch forward, we got to Bayern, we got to Munich yesterday, we got to Munich in February, and it felt like, okay, now's the time to pull the trigger on going to the next level. Same thing happened in 2004, same things happened in 2003, same thing happened under Postecoglou, same thing happened under Strachan. Every time it looks like we're about to take that next step, Barry, the board purposely pull us back. And I don't know if it's because they think if they get to that next step, their expectations go up even higher, and we can't be arsed managing that, because there's no other real explanation other than that.
No, and it is so frustrating, because I remember the sort of feeling of, there was a gutting feeling when Alphonso Davies scored that goal in the Allianz, but there was also enormous pride with the way that we performed. It wasn't one of those sort of back-to-the-wall performances. We actually took the game to Bayern Munich. And I remember that first half, we could have been, I know it doesn't work like that, but if we'd taken 2 or 3 more chances, we would have won that game. And I remember we came away from all the pods after that saying, look, we are 2 or 3 players away from being a really competitive side at this level. And then it just all turns to shit. You end up keeping players who don't want to be here. And that's fine. I think we all spoke. There was a natural sort of cycle, and this team is maybe coming to the end of it. I think we'll maybe touch on that later. There's maybe some players last night who are maybe suffering from that hangover of not being allowed to go. But it should all be focused on, right, we have a core here of players who look comfortable at this level. I know you could argue that we had a fairly kind draw in the league stage, but Bayern Munich is pretty much as good as it gets, and we went toe-to-toe with them. But like you say, we pull the rug from under the manager, we do it to the support. And we're not even, that's the thing, again, we'll come on to talk about this, but see the sort of commentary in the media that this entitlement, or we're not even asking for us to go out and spend 20 million on a player or buy 3 £15 million players. We just want players who, they don't have to be at the level, but they have to have the potential to go at that level. And instead, we go for bargain basement, and then we panic buy towards the end of the window. Now, Taneki, Scott says he looks like a real find, but again, he could have been in sooner. And I don't think our expectations are unrealistic. I think we are a fairly fair support. We know our limitations, but we also know the sort of the potential of the club. I think we majorly sort of punch below our weight for what we could be. And it's just so frustrating, because I think you could see that in Rodgers last night. It's basically it is what it is because of what's happened, and that's not good enough. We can't just write off this season because the charlatans in the boardroom have decided they can't be bothered anymore. So that all ties in with what we just spoke about how you separate that on the pitch, because we are all ambitious for the club, with sort of realistic ambitions, and it's a kind of gut punch because you know how good we could be, but we never want to sort of pull the trigger to get to that next level.
Yeah, and you know what really frustrates me is, you know, Brendan Rodgers using words like realism. Like, we have to be real about this. You know, we have to be real. We're here now. You just have to kind of get on with it. It's kind of like, he keeps using phrases like, you know, I'm not going to tell the Celtic supporters how to support their team, but it's like, just leave the but. Just, that's a full stop. And it's the same with Neil Lennon, and we'll get to them both. Sorry, Barry, you want to jump in?
I'm just going to jump back in again about see that realism and all that, but I remember, and I'm probably not his biggest fan on the Cynic of Postecoglou, but remember he used to say things like he doesn't want to temper the fans' expectations. It's his job to let the fans dream.
Yeah.
And that is what, if you are in the privileged position to manage our great club, you should take the reins off. Like, why not? Why can we not go to the next level? Why can't we punch above our weight? Why can't we go toe-to-toe and play our football and see where it takes us, rather than, we need to be realistic? No, we don't. We don't have to be realistic. That's the beauty of being a football fan. So allow us to dream. Allow us
to bloody dream. Let's get to the opening question. I'm going to I'm going to get your thoughts on the opening question, Scott. Opening question. Are you more optimistic about the Europa League campaign after yesterday's one each draw with Red Star Belgrade, or do you feel the same you did before the match? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a boring answer, but I think I feel exactly the same as I did beforehand. Like, I think me and you discussed it yesterday, the idea that it just felt like a draw even before it kicked off. Yeah. Like, all the research that you did on this team suggested that they are, in 9 ways out of 10, the same football club as us. To an almost sort of freakish degree. So I don't think we learned anything that we didn't know beforehand from last night, really. Yeah. At the same time, I would have happily taken the result, and if we can beat Braga next week, then it does set us up quite nicely. But I sort of came away from it with one big negative and one big positive. The big negative is just how incredibly slow and uninspired our build-up play was in the first half. And obviously that's been an issue all season. But if that continues, then I just don't think we're going to do anything in this tournament. And the midfield, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the midfield's becoming more and more of an issue week by week. The big positive is the defensive resilience and the game management, because we've seen that so rarely from Celtic over the years away from home in Europe. And we started to see it creeping in last season with like the performance away to Atalanta and away to Bayern and stuff like that. I thought we defended pretty well for the most part, and also just like we've all seen it so many times over the years, when that equaliser goes in, there's part of you thinking that right, their second goal is coming in about 3 minutes time here, and it didn't, and we still continued to give the ball away in central midfield infuriatingly often. But I thought our game management generally was better than it has been. But I suppose there was a wide spectrum of reactions from Celtic fans to that last night, and it probably comes down to how good you think this team is. Because if you think this is actually quite a good team, and all we need to do is get the new signings bedded in and get people that show up to speed physically, then you're probably looking at that. And thinking it's 2 points dropped, but then there's the other side of it, which is probably the side Rodgers is on based on his comments, where it's like, well, actually, this is just quite a flawed and limited Celtic team, and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. I also think there's a thing with early days in European campaigns where early results can be misleading because you don't really know how good teams are until the later stages. Like, for example, last year, Leipzig felt like an unbelievable result at the time, and then we got to the end of the group and I think they lost all of our games except one. So it took a shine off it a little bit. So if Red Star go on to be really good, then we'll look at that and be like, oh, that was actually a really valuable point, good performance, etc. But if not, then it will put a different sort of pallor on it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes from Brendan Rodgers, Barry, first half we weren't aggressive enough in our play, and then when we arrived in the final third of the field, I didn't think we spent enough time in there. We were giving the ball away with loose passing and didn't quite connect the game. Could have been any time between February to now, really? What is the disconnect that we can only play one half of football?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think it could be something as simple as personnel. I think there's a few players that kind of jump out to me who aren't on it and haven't particularly been on it since the start of the season. But just to kind of go back to that point, I think Rodgers is right, because there were large sort of swathes in the first half where we were camped inside their half, almost like it was like a sort of training routine. Our fullbacks were high, but then we didn't do anything with it. And the one thing that really frustrated me in the first half was that sloppiness of passing. The amount of times the ball was under hit or over hit out the park. And I think it was one of Rio Hatate's worst performances for us. I thought he was really, really poor. And he is the one that you're kind of looking to. It's funny because I've probably until last night, I've not been the biggest fan of Negro, and I thought he really grew into the game in the second half. But all season I've kind of thought maybe it's time for him to come out and Engels to come in. But after last night, I'm maybe wondering if it should be Engels comes in for Hatate and try that sort of particular midfield, because as Scott said, the midfield is looking really dysfunctional just now. There's sort of sometimes there's positives, as I say, like Negro in the second half, but they aren't doing it as a collective, and the three isn't really working. So potentially that could be a change. And then I thought Shamani was spot on last night on the reaction about Dyson. I thought he just looked disinterested. The one where he was miles offside, like he wasn't even sort of bothering his backside to hold his run. But again, you can't really. I suppose you can call him out for a poor performance like that. I think Rodgers did, which was quite surprising. But these players probably have checked out, and again, that's up to the club. If they're ready to go and there's an offer there, then it's not the players' fault that you haven't got your business done. So you can't really hold players hostage as we tried to with Marco Tillo, etc., and Jang over the summer. So again, it comes back to that point about the off-field stuff spilling into the on-field action. So. Yeah, in terms of the opening question as well, I was a kind of half and half. I think, as I said, there are real positives as we'll come on to, but it's weird. It's almost lopsided, because how often have we been really good attacking wise in Europe, and then we get a couple of goals off, and then we get picked off? But it's complete reverse now, where we look pretty solid, but there is that disconnect that Rodgers mentioned, and the amount of chances we missed. There's always a worry. If you're going to miss that amount of chances, then there's always that doubt in the back of your head that you're going to have more opportunities to win the game, even though we did. So it's quite an unusual position to be in as a Celtic fan, because we are traditionally sort of gung-ho attacking, and we always leave the back door open, but we seem to have got that part quite right. So maybe that's the harder part to do, sort out the defence, and it might be easier to kind of get that creativity going. But as you say, it's the same old story that's been going on since pretty much the full-time whistle and the Allianz in February. Yeah,
and I think, see, if you have a player and the window closes on the Monday and the player comes to you on the Thursday or the Wednesday and says, I want out, I want to go, my agent's getting me a move, so you better prepare to let me go. That's very different from it happening in February and him saying, just to give you enough warning, I want to go in the next window. I've been here for 4 years and I feel like it's time to move on. I need bother. That's fine. Like, Scott, it's I don't. There's a feeling that you can't almost speak openly about Dyson just because I think people really, really like him, and there's a level of professionalism kind of integrated into his character, but he is just a guy who didn't get a move that he was probably promised. You can understand if he's like, fuck this noise.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Stuart described it last night as sort of a line in the sand. I've generally been quite sympathetic towards Dyson so far, as poor as he has been, and last night was probably one of the first times, possibly influenced by alcohol, where I was just like, for fuck's sake, man. Like, because it was just miles off it. And I was talking about it with my mates in the group chat at half time. Like, ordinarily I would have just said, well, let's at least put him on the wing and take Yang off. But you just couldn't complain about him getting hooked, really, because he was miles off it. And up until now, I'm still not sure if he's chucked it as such. I'm not even sure if it's possible for these two things to be true at once. But I do feel like he is feeling sorry for himself, and it's just bleeding into his performances a lot. And I wonder how Rodgers is going to approach it over the next couple of games, because Iheanacho is doing a lot more than we probably thought he would have been capable of at this stage. But do you want him to be starting every game and playing 70, 80 minutes? Probably not. And there's no alternative there. There is absolutely no alternative. I don't think we're going to see Shin Yamada anytime soon. Johnny Kenny maybe off the bench. So it is a really sort of sticky situation we've got ourselves into. But yeah, I particularly liked Samani talking about talking about him pining for Wolverhampton or some shit little provincial place in England, because that is a part of it when you think about it. Like, we maybe do start to feel a tiny bit less sorry for him. Like, he wasn't getting linked to Barca or Bayern Munich or something. It was very much sort of teams who will maybe just about avoid relegation from the Premier League this season if they're lucky. But yeah, I certainly don't want to be writing him off at this stage, and I don't think we can afford to in any case.
Yeah, and also, as Scott and Barry have said, the reaction did drop yesterday. It's on the Cynic.Co, check it out. But just on the Maida thing and Iheanacho, obviously Iheanacho comes on and makes an instant impact. Playing with a centre forward creates opportunities. Who knew? But the fact of the matter is, you get this game against Braga, Barry, which is very integral to our push for anything in the Europa League, right? You have to win your home games. But we also have this huge game against Hibs on Saturday. And if you were looking at both of them, I think they're both really important. And I know people might look at Hibs' most recent results and say, well, they lost to Rangers, they drew with Hibs after Falkirk after being 2-0 up and all that. Maybe they are dropping off a little bit. I think maybe that's a sort of false kind of idea of where they are, especially coming to Celtic Park. Iheanacho can't play both games, I'd imagine, at this point in his fitness regime. He might only be able to play certain parts. Like, where do you prioritise is essentially the question.
It's a difficult one, because I remember us having this conversation before, maybe like towards the end of last season, we were talking about managing Cameron Carter-Vickers, etc., his return to fitness, and it's often the case that the next game is, not to use a cliche, but the next game is the most important, because if you don't play him and you slip up against Hibs, then thinking, why didn't you play him? I think I would roll the dice and start in the actual against Hibs and see how he does, and then if he can get a couple of goals in the first half or the first 60 minutes, then get him off and try and do the same against Braga. I know that he hasn't played a lot of football over the last couple of years, but I'd be tempted to do that, because I think you see the difference he makes. Like, the ball just sticks to him. His first touch is excellent. And yes, all the caveats about his fitness, etc., but you can tell that he is a player who I think is going to score goals for this team. His work rate looks good. And I think the Hibs game is a massive game. I know we do have the cushion in the league, but you want to keep that momentum going, because the domestic form has been good. So yeah, I think try and get the game won with the actual playing, and then see how he fares, because I tend to agree with that sort of statement that the next game is the most important, and then what will be, because I think Dyson has been really poor. I think I said the first home game of the season, his heart didn't look in it, and that's not something I sort of revel in saying, because he is the sort of the darling of the Celtic support right now, I would say. And it is only natural. I think you'd said in a few pods earlier in the week, Gall, that he's a human being. Like, there's obviously going to be a natural downturn if you are disappointed that you never got the move that you wanted, even if it was to some backwater in England. But yeah, I think starting the actual on Saturday would be my answer to that question, and then ideally start them in both games.
Just looking at, if you're Martin O'Neill and you're listening to this podcast, put your hands over your earmuffs. The XG in the first half of the Red Star game was 0.29, But the XG in the second half was 1.39. Obviously, that includes the goals as well. 50-50 in terms of possession. We'd more shots. Scott, it just felt like in the second half we just improved monumentally. Kobe Donovan getting a lot of praise, and rightly so. Your thoughts on that young man, and just who else kind of stood out for you?
Yeah, I thought he was outstanding, and I was just so glad to see his name on the team sheet to begin with, because I think with a lot of Rodgers' slightly strange and sometimes counterproductive personnel decisions this season, it would not have been that surprising if Ralston came back in. Like, I think every Celtic fan collectively, did a sort of massive sigh during the day when the club put out that video saying a certain someone was back at training today. Ralston.
Everyone told me it was Jota.
Yeah, I know.
But I, as I say, really glad to see him in the starting lineup, and I thought he did really, really well on the night. He sort of, like, during those times when we are giving Ralston sort of faint praise, the things that you say is that, like, he's so committed, he's so hardworking, he's so physically robust and stuff. Like, Donovan gives you all of that, but he's actually got mobility and ability on the ball. Like, he's seen the through ball he puts in for Negrin to create the Ian Actual chance. I just thought he really, really stood out. And the whole of the back four did well. It's probably one of Tierney's better performances since he came back.
Yeah.
The centre backs, it was the sort of game they love, because it was just sort of meat and potatoes, blocks and headers and all that, but they did it really well. And Negrin's an interesting one, because I would agree with Barry. I've found him increasingly frustrating over the last few weeks, and last night's performance wasn't immune from that at all, but he really grew into it. And the good things that he does do, and I say this as someone who really wants to see Engels and or Bernardo getting more game time, even if it is just off the bench. I think Negrin can do things that those two can, just in terms of those darting runs forward from midfield, like the one that creates the goal. I can't really see Bernardo or Engels doing that kind of thing. So you can see how he offers us something a little bit more unique, but he needs to add on a lot of other ingredients around about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I really delighted to see Kobe Donovan perform well. I thought he was very mature in how he played, very confident, very aggressive, very physical. He uses his body really well, which is great. Barry, the other kind of thing we touched on in the reaction, and I'd like to get both you gentlemen's points on it. Kasper Schmeichel. He's not performing to the level he did last season. There's been a lot of talk about, Sinisalo and, maybe getting an opportunity. What's your take on the whole situation?
Yeah, it is. And I think, given the nature of the position, it is very obvious when a goalkeeper starts to drop off, and they can decrease sort of rapidly. And there's the goal itself, but even before the goal, the distribution, which was one of his sort of key strengths last season. It looks like his confidence is maybe gone a wee bit as well. Maybe a hangover. I know somebody mentioned the cup final last season, but then it's strange, because then without him you maybe lose the game, because he did have the save kind of straight after our goal, and then one after their goal as well, and the save where he touched the one onto the bar. But yeah, I think you're starting to see a decline in him, and I think we all could have maybe predicted that because of his age, etc. And I know it started to happen with Joe Hart as well. But if it was me, I would start to sort of drip feed Sinisalo in where you can. And I know that that's maybe not the done thing. I remember Roma, maybe the sort of turn of the century, they used to sort of swap their two goalkeepers fairly regularly to great success, because I think they won the league that year. But it's not maybe something that's done a lot. I know Liverpool did it last year with Kelleher and Alisson, cup games, etc. But I think it's fairly obvious that he's not going to be here next season, regardless. I
don't know. I think Celtic will offer him a deal. I do. I just think that's how we work. I think we'll offer him a deal, and I think he'll take it.
Oh, good. But if we are going to have any faith in this, I know we gave the club a lot of plaudits for that sort of plan when they signed the two goalkeepers pretty much in a couple of days within each other, that Sinisalo was going to be the succession plan. But what we don't want to get is that we start next season with Sinisalo and he hasn't played much this year and we realise he's not good enough, because that's a recipe for disaster. So I think we need to give him more games, but how do you do that? And for Schmeichel personally, I think if he was to come out of the team, I think it'd be even harder to get him back up to speed as well. So it's a real sort of catch-22. But me personally, I think given the sort of downturn in his form, I would be starting to look to phase him out as well.
Interesting. What about yourself, Scott? I mean, it was, it looked like... He looked like, obviously with the first goal that we concede, the only goal we concede, he makes this decision, quite a rash decision, to go and kind of block the ball back down. Then there's also the situation where there was a couple of times when the ball was put into the box and he came for it and kind of get disorientated or whatever, couldn't come for the ball. We're not making him out like he's Mr. Magoo, but at the same time, there's been a kind of drop off in consistency within games. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, at the goal at the time, maybe because I was in a pub and wasn't paying particularly close attention to replays and stuff, but I didn't think too much of it. I didn't think it was directly his fault or anything, but the more you watch it back, the worse it looks, really. And I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt, because I think he was quite influential for us last season when it comes to winning the League Cup. Probably played a big part, maybe not a central role, but played a big part in us getting through to the Champions League playoff round and stuff. But it does feel like he's been, a lot of people have had him on notice since that blunder that cost us the Scottish Cup essentially, and he needed to start this season well, and he hasn't really. And it's weird in a way, because I think I'm right in saying we've only conceded 3 goals in all competitions.
Yeah.
And were any of those directly his fault? I suppose you could maybe at a push argue last night. Even then, it maybe be harsh. But it's more just I think with all goalkeepers, a lot of it's just general vibe. Like, are they giving you reassurance? Are they giving you a sense of calm as a defender or as a fan? And if they're giving off sort of nervous vibes, then it just spreads to everyone. And that's what he's doing at the moment. It's weird little moments, which, as I say, aren't necessarily leading to goals, but are just giving you an uneasy feeling. The main one I always think of this season is that bizarre one in Kazakhstan where McGregor gives him the shit back pass and it's bobbling, and he somehow just fucks it to the degree where we gave away the free kick in the box, didn't we?
That's right.
And there's lots of little moments like that, and you almost wonder if he's just trying a little too hard from a psychological point of view. Even just some of the shouts last night, just getting himself involved in situations which weren't necessarily anything to do with him, like the Yang thing and all that. I think he does just need to settle down a little bit. In my opinion, I wouldn't necessarily. I still think he deserves just about the benefit of the doubt as a number one for now, but I don't think we're too far off sort of reaching that threshold where most people do want Sinisalo to be the number one. And even if not, I think Barry makes a really good point that we still need to be bringing Sinisalo in semi-regularly, even if Schmeichel doesn't start throwing in howlers every week, because we need that proper succession planning for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of odd ones yesterday where he kicks the ball straight to the Red Star player, second half, balls out for a corner, and then he looks at everyone in his defence like, where the fuck were you? Which I thought was quite funny. And in the first half, when he just kicks the ball out of play, just a big hoof at a play. Again, I don't, we're not saying he's, on the chopping block or anything, but what we are saying is, just have to keep an eye on it. I think Brendan Rodgers will play him in every game, so it's kind of almost a moot point. But yeah, we get a question from Jan. Good morning, folks. Sent it this morning. Watching the Red Star Belgrade game last night, and considering the start we have had to the season, do you think that we have any players in the squad which have guaranteed their place in the team solely based on performances so far? Loving the podcasts, all the best. Plus, some blatant free advertising. If anyone likes weird and drony instrumental music, my band is playing at Block this Saturday night. His band are called Seas Starry, and I've listened to them, and they're really good. So check out Jan's band, See Starry. They are at Block on Saturday night. Great stuff. That's an interesting one in terms of the question, Barry. Guaranteed their place solely on performances, because it feels like there's a lot of players who are there for balance. Yang's a player who's there for balance. Yang wouldn't be playing. Maida's there because Maida's probably past, what he's done for Celtic in the past. Callum McGregor's there because he's a Celtic captain. Rio Hitate's dropped off form. Kobe Donovan's there, I think, on complete merit. Fuck, you could argue that Liam Scales is there on complete merit. Kieran Tierney's there. The merit thing, what's your thoughts? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think that's true. Just as you're reading that, I was thinking there that back to that thing that we mentioned earlier about players coming to the end of the cycle, and a number of the players you mentioned there, I think that is the case, and a lot of them are just there because of what they've done in a Celtic shirt prior to this season. And if it was on merit, I think you're right, Donovan would be there. Scales weirdly was one that jumped out for me as well, because I thought last night he defended really well, and I think defensively he has been really solid this season. I know he's not everyone's sort of cup of tea with good reason because of his distribution, etc. But if it's purely as a penalty box defender, I think he's been really good this season. CCV, he's had his moments this season when he's been a wee bit ropey, and he's another one that kind of smacks of he's probably overstayed his welcome, for want of a better phrase, that he probably himself would have wanted to have gone. I still think he's our best defender, but he maybe isn't that sort of bulletproof. You could lay your hat on him that you maybe would have in previous seasons. I know that injuries maybe, have taken their toll as well. So it's a really good question, because I don't think there's many. I think Tanetke is kind of given us a bit of belief and excitement again, although I do think he was a wee bit quieter last night. But probably only Scales and Donovan, because Negrin, like Scott said, he's frustrating, although he kind of stepped up last night, and that's what we want to see more of. But I don't think it's enough to say he's guaranteed a starting place. It's interesting saying all this because, like you said about Schmeichel, it seems like Rodgers will just play these guys and run them into the ground, and hope that he plays them into form, rather than building sort of healthy competition for the likes of Engels and Bernardo, etc. So, no, I think only Donovan and Scales out of the starting lineup from last night.
What about yourself, Scott? It's an interesting one.
Yeah, I couldn't really disagree with Barry there. Because there's so many guys on the bench who aren't really getting a look in, either with little cameos or with starting appearances. It's hard to even tell whether some people are in form or out of it, and there's just an assumption that they must be out of it if Rodgers just isn't giving them a look in at all. I'm thinking in particular of guys like Engels, Bernardo. So yeah, even the fact that Tierney and Sriracha is a sort of live debate of who you want to start there, I think that shows you that he hasn't had a particularly sort of glittering start to his second spell here either. So yeah, there's not a lot, and it tells you something about the overall state of play at Celtic at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go through the results from Opponent Watch. New feature, Opponent Watch.
You get 2 watches tonight.
Yeah, we do. I can't wait for the next one. But Opponent Watch, Midtjylland beat Sturm Graz. Obviously, we're playing both of them. Midtjylland won 2-0. Sturm Graz come to Glasgow. We go to Midtjylland. So an away game and a home game. Roma beat Nice 2-1 as well. Obviously, Roma come to Celtic Park. Braga beat Feyenoord. So we go to Feyenoord. And Braga come to Celtic Park, obviously, very soon. Bologna and Utrecht, as we're recording, they've not kicked off yet. So we'll kind of give you updates on them over the next couple of days. Aye, Barry, a bit scary with some of those results and some of those performances.
Yeah, definitely. The Braga one was one that jumped out at me for more ways than one, because I had loads of both teams to score last night, and that was the one game that let me down. So it cost me money, but also Braga are a bit of a strange team, because I know that we played them under Lennon's first time around as manager, and they kind of played us off the park over there, and I know that Rangers have played them a couple of times in recent seasons as well. And I was just looking through their team last night because obviously I had the sort of vested interest with the bet, and they've got some good players. Moutinho, is it them? And obviously our good friend Lagerbeeke, is Neil I like to call him. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see how they travel. Obviously coming over here, but I think that's maybe the beauty of the new format as well, that because you'll play these teams and they don't play the same teams, they won't play the same teams that we will necessarily. It's really interesting. So yeah, I think if we can get the positive result against Braga, then we're really up and running in this competition. But it will be a tough game. Because that's a fantastic result for them. That's one that I thought that Feyenoord would win fairly easily. So, yeah, it's interesting, and I think again the format just kind of makes it more interesting than it would have been the previous way. Yeah,
what about you, Scott? You worried, and obviously we asked the opening question, but just with those results, is it kind of more stark what the kind of what we've got to do?
Yeah, I do think the way the fixtures are sort of front loaded. I think anything other than a win would be disappointing next week. But after that, you've got Sturm at home, you've got Midtjylland away. We really should be racking up a decent amount of points to give ourselves a bit of margin for error in the second half of the group stage. But yeah, it's as I touched on it earlier on, the way that it evolves as the group stage goes on, and sometimes there are surprise packages and teams that who turn out to be a lot more dangerous than you expect. So I think Midtjylland might be one of them. They looked quite decent against Hibs from what I saw, even though they made hard work of beating them. So the fact that we're going back there, having lost there a couple of years ago under Ange, albeit with like extremely half-baked team on the park. I think Dane Murray played, didn't he?
Much younger,
babyface.
Some things never change though, Scott. We've got a half-baked team.
Bring back Stephen Welsh on loan for that one.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. We've spoken about it before. The fact that it is sort of hard to get up for it, the Europa League compared to the Champions League, but you do get that extra element of sort of colour and variety and different teams and different grounds. So yeah, I think this is a big one next week. This is really going to tell us a lot about how it's going to pan out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to move on. If you want more kind of coverage of the game yesterday, check out the reaction which dropped straight after the game. It is available if you go to the Cynic.Co. The fan protest. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, Firhill, I thought visually looked excellent. I thought there was a great unison with that sort of collective. Barry, what did you make of the kind of Firhill protest?
Yeah, I thought it looked great. It was fantastic to see, almost like a mosaic with all the pictures being held up, and the chanting is in the banner at the front as well, and then the individual banners throughout the game about the Champions League qualifier fuck-ups as well. So yeah, I thought it looked great. I would say that one was more successful than the weekend before at Rugby Park for one reason or another. And I thought it was interesting seeing Mackay and Nicholson squirming and kind of glued to their phones. And I'd love to see, I don't think I've kind of seen anyone sort of lip read what Mackay was saying.
Oh, the Mackay one, yeah.
He looked fuming, didn't he? But I don't know what he was saying. I think Lorenzo maybe said it looked like he was kind of swearing about what he was saying, but I don't know. We don't want to be speculating. But no, I think it's picking up pace, and if each week we can build on like the sort of previous week, the campaigns, then we'll be doing well, because, like I say, Rugby Park, I think it was successful to an extent, but Firhill was visually really good as well, and I think that there's plenty in the media talking about it. There's people sort of trying to tell us how to think, as you mentioned earlier, Gall, but the more that we can do that to sort of ramp this campaign up, the better, and I think it will happen.
Rogers was asked about potential boycotts, and he was asked if that's going to affect the sort of team. So he replied, I really hope so. Asked if he hoped that fans will park any planned boycotts, because that's what you do with boycotts, you just park them. I really hope so. I think the lift that the supporters will give the team in these European games will be absolutely critical. We sensed it here tonight, and our fan base and how fanatical they are really push us on in this competition. So I really hope so. Like I said, I cannot tell the supporters what to do and how to think, but really, if they can really help us out as a team, that will be amazing, because we really feel the benefit of that. A packed out Celtic Park can really help us over these coming games. Look, I understand the position the manager's in. I get that. He's not going to come out and say anything counter to what he said there, Scott. But do you think if there are more empty seats than usual and it is a little bit more sparse, the game is a 5:45 kickoff as well, which actually might help us anyway, do you think that it will make any sort of impact in regard to thinking?
Not really. It certainly shouldn't do. Like you said earlier on, it does feel as if Rodgers is sort of trying to have it both ways at the moment, in terms of almost ordering the protests to stand down, but not wanting to be seen to criticise the fans at the same time. And he's not quite good enough with words to tread that very careful balance. So yeah, it's the reality of protests is, for it to be truly effective, you can't just go, do you know what, we'll just do it at the wee games or something, and we'll just leave it for the biggest games with the biggest amount of attention and TV audiences. That's really not how it works. So I don't know exactly what is planned for the Braga game. As you say, the fact that it's an early kickoff does give it a slightly different feel, but it really shouldn't be any kind of excuse for us not delivering in a big game. There might be, I don't know, 50,000 as opposed to a full house. That's still a lot of fans, and I'm sure it'll create a racket if the team gives them a reason to on the pitch.
I won't be there. I've myself and Barry and most of the cynics with season tickets and with that option have come off the Home Cup ticket scheme and made it clear that they're not going to take Europa League packages. I think you have to have a little. Again, this is just my point of view. I'm not going to tell anyone how to do what they want to do to force change. But I think the narrative that you as an individual can't do anything, I think that's not true. Mm. I think individuals and collective movements change everything, and so I wouldn't like that. The idea that I've given up my ticket, so therefore, but it doesn't matter because there's a line of people standing behind me ready to take them. I mean, does it? Is there going to be a line of people? If I give up my season ticket, will there be 10 other people wanting to take it? Maybe there will. But the point is, if we all act together and we all make a stand, we all take a stand, that's how change happens. And so I'm going to keep banging that drum. And if you want to get on board, great. And if you don't, that's fine too. But you have to make sacrifice to get change. That's as simple as that, Barry. Yeah,
absolutely. And like you say, we don't really sort of want to pontificate of what people should do. It's a personal decision, but I totally agree. Like, we have to show some sort of protest, and you and I and sort of many others across the support are choosing to vote with our feet for additional games on top of our season ticket, the Home Cup ticket scheme, etc. And I saw people kind of half joking, or maybe not, on social media saying like, "Oh, how do you get back on?" Because obviously, as we'll come on to, there's a big game in not next month, but the following month on the horizon. But like you, I think you have to have some sort of sacrifice, and it might not work, but you and I are willing to give it a go. And I've sort of made my peace with that. It will be, I don't doubt, when it comes to Thursday, it will be a real sort of hardship to do, because I can't remember the last time I didn't go to a European campaign. We're talking 25 years, maybe even longer than that. But that's the decision I've made, and I'll just need to make my peace with that. But something has to be done, because we can't just accept what's been offered to us or what's been given to us. And a few good results aren't going to change that. So yeah, I think that there'll be other ways, and people are creative these days in how they can protest. But for me personally, I couldn't stomach giving them more money than I already have.
Absolutely. We'll get to some other comments from some people in regard to that about Celtic playing better. Celtic Fans Collective is on. It's the collective name for this movement that's happening. It's on all social media. Check it out. Just search for Celtic Fans Collective. There was a statement put out yesterday. I'll read the statement out. Yesterday, affiliation of Registered Celtic Supporters Club, Association of Irish Celtic Supporters Club, Boys Celtic, Celtic Disabled Supporters Association, Celtic Supporters Association and Green Brigade received an invitation from Celtic to attend a meeting regarding the policing of the Derby match on March 16th. After months of delay, the club is finally set to release the findings of the independent investigation by Fairhurst. In conjunction with the Celtic Fans Collective, the supporters group have unanimously voted to decline this invitation. Until Celtic FC signal an intention to answer all of the questions raised in the open letter and begin to engage positively with the wider support, we have no confidence in meeting with the club under the current leadership. Scott, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, because I know the club had a meeting with the trust, didn't they? But from what I've seen, they haven't responded to any of the points that all the different fan clubs and associations or fan media put to them. And I think the very least they could do is to at least dignify that with a response. So I certainly, with the Fairhurst inquiry, I don't want to prejudge it, but I think it is the right decision based on what has been said and done recently, or not said and done as it happens.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's the right thing to do. I think until there's some sort of engagement and an answer to what's kind of been put towards them, no, I do not meet with them. I think that's the right thing. Barry, what's yourself?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because again, they probably thought it'd be a bit of good PR for them, and look, we are listening to your concerns, but that's one of many of the concerns, and until there's proper dialogue and they want to address all of them, then I think that stance is correct, and I think it shows the message that the supporters are united and we aren't just going to go away because they sort of they want to be seen to sort of giving some sort of concession to the protests. So no, I think that's the right thing to do, and more power to the movement.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a Celtic Supporters Limited group formerly incorporated. It's Duncan Smiley, David Lowe, and Peter McGowan. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the Lunch Club tomorrow. We don't have enough time to kind of go into detail, but yeah, there's things happening. Some of them, yeah, maybe a little less counterproductive in my point of view, but yeah, we'll look at that. As I say, check out the Celtic Fans Collective on all social media. We're trying to make everything work. Fan media is coming together to try and get the message across. I'm personally very aware that there's a lot of individual fans who maybe feel a little bit disconnected to it, because when first part of my Celtic supporting career, I was very much part of a supporters club, and then the second part of my Celtic supporting career, I went to the game on my own before we started the Cynic. So I'm very aware that people might feel a little bit isolated on that, but absolutely our point is to try and get the message across and all that, and we're just starting out this movement and we're all part of it, so we will do the best to get our points across.
Yeah, so I was going to say as well, I think that's why the particular method that the fans chose to protest with at Firhill was really important when they listed up the names of all these terrible teams that we've lost to in the Champions League over the years, because that just really drove home for me. This is a pattern. It's not a one-off event. It's not happening in isolation. It's been happening year after year after year, and every time, a part of the reason that we don't see substantial change is because everyone almost forgets to be pissed off about it within a month or two.
Absolutely,
because we just get distracted by domestic results or whatever. So it really does have to be a lot more sustained this time, and if that involves decisions like the one we've just touched on there, then I think that's all for the better.
Absolutely, Scott. Well put. We're going to do a new feature now. It's called Stooge Watch. It's Curley from the Three Stooges. Stooge Watch is just basically something we'll highlight throughout the Cynic on a regular basis, and essentially what it is it's bored stooges, people who work for the club who are not willing to make any sort of support for the support. So we've got two members of Stooge Watch today. I'm going to start with Peter Grant. And someone who suffered by having bad management and bad, the Kellys and the Whites, really almost putting the club in the fucking toilet. Maybe you kind of see the wood through the trees. This was his comment. And on to BBC Scotland. If they keep winning, a lot of the heat goes out of the protests. The people who are leading the Celtic Fans campaign will hate hearing that because to them, this is a permanent thing that isn't resolved until there are boardroom changes. But we've seen this before. It's the nature of fans. They calm down when the team are winning. That was a very limited point he's made there, but he was a very limited footballer as well anyway. So, Barry, what's your thoughts on has-been Peter Grant?
Yeah, not surprising. The man who's employed as the co-commentator on Celtic TV, who wears clothes that I imagine wouldn't have been out of place when he was playing, those big shoulder-padded blazers, etc.
Oh, by the way, Red Star manager last night.
Oh, I know.
Unreal.
Jamesy Cotter. Yeah, but it's no surprise for Peter Grant because these guys, it's so strange that you say, Gall, he knows full well the firsthand how it feels to have a board who do not care about the support, do not care about the way they're running the club. But it's because he's employed by the club, and he's maybe one of these guys who thinks, well, you can't criticise Celtic, like it could be worse, it could be Rangers.
Aye.
And that's just such a small-minded attitude. When we spoke earlier about the ambition and how we don't sort of tap into the potential of the club, and guys like him are happy for us just to kind of know your place in the chain. So no surprise for him, and yeah, a thoroughly dislikable character in my eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. For a guy who liked to point a lot, he doesn't know how to point at the fucking right target. Do you know what I mean, Scott? It's just as Barry says, he's employed, and people will say, well, he wants a paycheck and all that sort of stuff. But see, at the end of the day, man, he has made his personality off the fact he's a Celtic fan.
Yeah,
that's what fucking annoys the shit out of me.
Yeah, there's something particularly cynical about it, isn't there? As someone who's always traded off that, and now because he's got a job sitting next to Jerry McCulloch for 90 minutes, he suddenly thinks he's on North Korean state TV or something. Yeah, it's particularly disappointing. You'd like to think, even though he's separated by a lot of years and a lot of time as a manager and a pundit and a player from his years as a true fan, that he could still sort of put himself in our place, but clearly he can't or just doesn't want to. But I think that's a really good point you make about this is a guy who his career has been adversely affected by exactly the kind of mismanagement that we're seeing now. And I think we're going to touch on it in the next question with Lennon. That's a guy who constantly lost Champions League qualifiers.
Yep. Because
we went into them half-baked, having not done any business. And here he is just apologising for exactly that. It's nuts.
Yeah, obviously Peter Grant was a Celtic fan growing up. Neil Lennon famously was a Liverpool fan. Let's discuss what Neil Lennon said yesterday about Celtic being knocked out of the Champions League. It's a huge disappointment, obviously not being in the Champions League, but they're the most fraught games of the season to come so early.
They're fraught because of us. They're fraught because we don't need to be fraught.
The game was in late August. I know the fans are very discontent with the board. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't put it all on the board. I think that the team that Brendan had was good enough over two legs to beat Kairat, and I'm pretty sure that the board would have been working away in the background to try and get deals done. To get play. They were they? Like, even if they were, they didn't do it. And this idea that because they were trying and they couldn't get them over the line, they had fucking... Oh, I'm getting annoyed. Do you want to come in, Barry? Yep. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, just when you'd sent the rundown for that, I looked out that message that was doing the rounds towards the end of August, and Neil Lennon said at the time, I don't know if it was first or second time around, because, as we all know, the processes have been the same for 25 years. But Lennon said there was a lot we wanted to do in the summer, but the financial reality and the club strategy meant you can't always act as quickly as you like. Sometimes it feels like the process is just too slow. What's changed, Neil?
What's changed?
What's made you love Mr. Dermot and Mr. Desmond and Mr. Lawler so much as he calls them?
Yeah, he says this. Talking about the board, this is what Neil fucking Lennon said. It's their club, and they're entitled to voice their opinion any way they want. The Celtic fans have been amazing over the course, but there's a realism about this and a sustainability that the club have to plan, not just for this season, but for years to come. Get £77 million in the fucking bank. If you're spending 10, 12 million pounds on a player on top of the wages, it eats a lot into the money. They talk about us like we aren't. I can't read anymore. Scott, say something, because I'm really annoyed and I might just...
Yeah, it just frustrates life for me as well. Just the idea, it's all there's almost this concept of like Celtic exceptionalism, as if these issues are unique to us. They're not. There's loads of teams that like us who, because of their coefficient, are going to when they win the league, which most of them do, are going to go into these Champions League qualifiers at the same time, and most of them prepare properly, win the qualifiers, and go into the tournament. We've spoken about Club Brugge, even Red Star are an example of it. As the Dinamo Zagreb are another example of it. You can talk about the Champions path and all that, and how it's made it a little bit easier over the years. But no one, I'd be amazed. I'd need to look into the stats, but I don't think there's any other club of our size or relative to our size in Europe who has fucked it quite so many times against just really limited, inferior opponents, and it's all comes down to the failings in the transfer market, and the fact that some people can't see that or refuse to see it. I mean, some of the stuff Lennon came out with, it was just, it was like just like a subpar super scoreboard caller. It just like the stuff about, I mean, Boyd was coming out with this on Sky a couple of weeks ago of like, oh, trusty Engels and all that. They spent money last summer and it didn't work out. Like, all right, then we'll just never spend money again.
Yeah.
We'll just play the 18s every week.
Yeah.
Like, and even just the idea that all those signings would, like, I know none of them are really featuring now, but all of them did play a part in the Champions League success last year, and it helped earn us a shitload of money. So you speculate to accumulate, and the fact that, yeah, I thought some of it was just so lazy. He hadn't even really engaged his brain about it.
Neil Lennon is, in my opinion, and listen, you're entitled to your own opinion. I know people grew up with Neil Lennon and they love him and all that, but Neil Lennon is not on the side of the Celtic support. Neil Lennon is fully embedded in a board that are billionaires that do not care about the working class and do not care about the Celtic support. In my opinion, he's an enemy of the support. And I do not care for him. I do not like him. I will never forgive him. And every time he speaks, it annoys me and bothers me, just because he takes this referential idea that he's speaking on behalf of the club.
Yeah, even just the fact that he just slotted right back in after, he could not have been more unpopular during the season that we don't like to talk about. And the fact that he's just slotted right back into that, and he's the first pick to be a pundit on each and every Celtic game, is just bizarre to me.
Yeah, maybe he should be focusing on his own teams at Dunfermline. Are they doing okay? Well, because if you're getting beat off Scott Brown, you must be in trouble. Listen, we're going to finish up. Look, we've run out of time. We've got lots of podcasts coming up. This is the point I want to try and make to everyone. There's lots of podcasts happening all the time where we cover all the news. We wanted to talk about Dermot Desmond and Martin O'Neill and Louis Palmer, weirdly, but we had lots of stuff we wanted to cover, but we couldn't cover it tonight, so we'll cover it tomorrow in the Lunch Club, which will be available if you subscribe. But just I want your final thoughts on, and we're going to do a full preview of the Hibs game tomorrow as well, so kind of sign up and listen to that. Barry, Hibs, how are you feeling? Potential protests? How do you think the game's going to play out? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually, in terms of protests, it's been weird, hasn't it, that it's been so long since we've had a home game, since this movement sort of come together. So it'll be interesting to see. I'd imagine there'll probably be correspondence on that tomorrow, as was the case last Friday, I believe, wasn't it, ahead of Thistle. I think it'll be a good barometer to see, sort of temperature check, how the home support are feeling, because it has been away games that we've seen, and as we saw at Kilmarnock, it wasn't fully unified for that protest, but it'd be great to see around the ground how much or how many of the support are feeling the way that we are. In terms of the game, I'm really looking forward to it. I think Hibs always sort of take the game to us at Celtic Park, which isn't often the case. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing some of the new signings, Tanecki in particular, and any actual he starts, which I think he should. So I think it'll be a really good game, but I think we should have enough to beat them. Great
stuff. Scott, yourself, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. I think the interesting thing about the protest movement is there's a lot of thought and effort going into it. It's not as if it's not a load of lads just turning up with some words painted on a bedsheet every week. Like, it's a different approach for every game. And I think they will be interested to see what they've got up their sleeve for this game. And yeah, I'm just really interested to see what Hibs bring to the table. As Barry said, like I think we played them 4 times at home last season, because we got them at home in both cups, and we won every game. But every time it was competitive, every time they asked questions of us.
Yeah,
and I fully expect them to do that again. From like a Scotland point of view, it's interesting to see how Mulligan and Bowie closer up.
Yeah.
But from our point of view, definitely if this is a team that's going to be in the mix for third, fourth, maybe even second. So if we can beat them, then it leaves us in quite a strong position going forward. And hopefully Tanecki's first home game, was it?
Yeah.
Really excited to see what he does on that big pitch.
Yeah, great stuff. On the Cynic, as I say, tomorrow we've got the lunch club, which we'll be recording at 1:30, and we'll look at the Hibs game in more detail. We'll cover all the rest of the news, and we'll look ahead to the game. Then on Saturday we've got the reaction, which our good friend Barry will be part of, and Christopher Bowd as well. So we'll be recording that straight after the game at a location in town. It's been a joy as always. Thanks for getting involved. Check out thecynic.co for all your details to sign up and listen to pods and stuff. Barry Gallagher, a joy as always.
Thank you very much. Nice to be in the sort of pundit seat this week, and I'll see you on Saturday, hopefully toasting a famous victory.
Lovely stuff. Scott, a joy as always. We'll speak to you again soon, sir.
Nice one. Thanks a lot for having me.
Great stuff. From Barry Gallagher, from Scott Fleming, from myself, Chris Gallagher, this has been the Cynic Weekly, and we'll speak to you down the road.